working at a nonprofit that marketed clothing and attire to adolescents. And one of the things that was surprising to me is, this is in the early 2000s, they said demographically adolescents have more discretionary spending than any other age group until retirement.
Wow.
I don't know if it's true anymore, but there's no rent. Welcome back to Power of the Mind, the podcast that gives you simple tools to help you understand yourself and other people a little bit better. Today, we're going to talk about scarcity and why we always want what we don't have. Why is the grass always greener on the other side? Stick around and you'll find out.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Cast 11 Network with Power of the Mind, presented by Granite Mountain Behavioral Healthcare. And as always, Greg Struve, how's it going?
Oh, it's going good.
It's feeling pretty good. New year. It's awesome. I want to talk about, like, humans are nuts, right? They're just a little goofy on how we do some things.
Sure.
I think everybody would agree that my thing is, we always want what we can't have. Or you hate something in your life, you don't like it, but then when you lose it, all you can think about are the good. You know, it's like you're in a toxic relationship and then you break up and you go, oh, remember how she used to make me breakfast every Sunday? Or her chocolate chip pancakes were so good. Mm-hmm. And you don't remember the bad, right? So my thing is, why do we do that? Is it our brains being tricky? Are we trying to, I don't know, what you got?
Well, it's certainly a universal phenomenon, right? The idea that what I don't have, I want, and what I have, I don't value as much. If you study negotiation as a science, if you study sort of the soft science of negotiation, one of the first principles of negotiation is I will devalue what I have. So if I want a certain amount of money for my contract and you offer it to me, I immediately am less interested in the contract. And so one of the things that I'll do in negotiation, one of the principles of negotiation, is you go back and forth a couple times. Otherwise I devalue it too much. Mm-hmm. So my initial response and the sort of the call and response process in negotiation takes that into account. But there is something to be said for that in human nature. Now, it does actually make sense if we're looking at it from an evolutionary psychology point of view, because it's probably smart to want more than what you have, because you don't really know if what you have is enough.
Right.
So let's say we have figured out how to store grain, for example. At what point do we have enough grain stored? Well, we need enough grain stored to make it until the next growing season, right?
Right.
Well, that's not true. We need to have enough so we can plant for the next growing season. That's part of it. But then we need to have enough grain set aside to help supplement our diet until the next harvest. Except sometimes the next harvest doesn't come. There's no rain. There's too much rain. I work with an orphanage in Kenya, and one of the things they do is they have a farm, and it is a prescient reminder of how frickin' hard it is to farm. It is so hard. We're hanging out. We have 100 pigs, right? We're making little pigs. We're selling the pigs. Swine flu comes and they all die. Except 6. In the whole region, every pig died except 6 ours at the orphanage.
Wow.
Right? Well, that's because we took good care of our pigs and did the best we could. And we took those 6 pigs and now we're growing them back. But the guy who runs the orphanage, he knew somebody who had 1,000 pigs and they all died. 1,000 pigs.
Wow.
So it's really easy to be in our modern world. I know I say this all the time, but it's true. It's really easy to sit and take for granted that the next meal is at Safeway. The next meal is available to me most of the time. Every once in a while, my circumstances are such that I really can't get a meal, but it's few and far between the American who has to miss a meal. And if I do have to miss a meal, there's social organizations that are designed to help me with that.
But the panic that sets in, we went to Cincinnati and our plane landed at like 11:30 or whatever. And all I wanted to do was find the Airbnb, get settled, and then we'll get something to eat. And so parking was crazy and difficult, and getting up to the Airbnb was more difficult than it probably should have been. And we were just tired. And we get inside and there's no food, and you're not carrying food with you because you just got off an airplane. And the restaurant there's one down the street, but it closes in 10 minutes and they're not going to be able to feed you. And the panic that's like, we're not going to be able to eat. This is crazy. Like, it's just, we take it for granted that everything is so readily available, but we did get a piece of pizza, but
Thank heavens.
thank goodness. But it was just, you take it for granted that it's, your next meal is just swipe your card and you got it. So.
Yeah. So we devalue what we have in part because it's probably smart for survival. And there really isn't ever enough to guarantee survival. That's one of the challenges of being a human being. How much money is enough? It's so funny. I had a client at one point who was worth somewhere probably in the 9-figure range, at least in the high 8-figure range. And we're just having a conversation and doing some therapy on the topic at hand. And it suddenly becomes apparent to me that this client sees themselves as not having any power in the world, and specifically political power. And it's so interesting because we all assume that the wealthy sort of make decisions, and there's probably some truth to that. I would imagine that, or at least the people who make decisions are wealthy. But this individual, by most measuring sticks, would be extremely wealthy. You're talking, 1/10 of 1%.
Right.
And that was not their experience. Interesting. And it just drove home to me the idea that, we really are not wired to believe that we have enough. What is normal? This is a person who grew up in wealth, right? So this was just the normal situation. When we have a significant change in terms of economic status, we probably notice it. But I always tell folks, if you didn't grow up in a trailer, you're not going to very willingly end up in a trailer park here in the United States, right? If you didn't grow up in a hut, you might not be very excited about moving back into a hut. If your socioeconomic status is largely determined by your peers, your perception of your socioeconomic status is largely determined by your peers. And so that's the other ironic thing, is in America, we have abundance that's historically without precedent. Not even close. Just things like electricity, let alone air conditioning.
Right.
Let alone McDonald's. We bemoan McDonald's or Walmart or Amazon for all the greed attached to them and all their lack of love, essentially, for humanity. And there's probably some merit to questioning that. And my gosh, we have so much. It's unimaginable how much we have, even 50 years ago or 100 years ago. And that's actually true of the world as well. I can't remember where I was reading this, but recently I read a study that showed that in the last 20 years, the level of absolute poverty in the world, and I think absolute poverty was defined as making less than $1 a day. The amount of people in absolute poverty is decreased by something like 50%. Like it's astronomical and without precedent in all of human history. Wow. Up until the Industrial Revolution, only I think 5% of the population, generally speaking, was not an agrarian, just basically not a farmer, not somebody who tried to make a living off the land, was not living in absolute poverty. Right? And here we are, a couple hundred years later, saying, man, what do I do with all these shoes? You know, we literally, those, and we look up at the people. It's always much easier to look up the mountain than at the people who are behind you. We look up at the people who have what we think of as power and money and wealth. And the reality is we have incredible, maybe not power, but certainly money and wealth, just by merit of their being Walmart.
Yeah. Amazon.
You know? And again, I'm not saying it's awesome that Walmart's the biggest employer in America now. 75 years ago, it was General Motors. Well, General Motors paid an awful lot more to everybody. And, things have been better for sure. And also, man, we are doing great. And we don't notice it.
Mm-mm.
So all that to be said comes back to the question, why do we always want more? Well, because wanting more is biologically safer. It's not particularly useful. And it certainly doesn't make us happier. But your brain doesn't really give a shit if you're happy. Your brain just wants you to be alive.
Stay alive, be comfortable, right?
Yeah. And now, what's interesting, though, is it doesn't always answer the question about why do I want back what I have lost? If I have a boyfriend or a girlfriend and I break up with them, I think back to the good times. Right?
Yeah.
I get nostalgic. Oh, I miss this or that.
The one that got away.
I miss that. And we do notice that there's a connection between that and avoidant attachment. People who are avoidant in their attachment processes tend to value people they're in relationship with a bit less until they're gone. I had a client not too long ago I was talking about, and she said, he's driving me crazy. I think I might leave him. I said, well, you certainly can. However, you may want to keep in mind that while someone is close to you like that, because you have an avoidant attachment style, which you can look up on Instagram if you're listening and don't know what an avoidant attachment style is. It's just one of the 4 types of attachment. We covered it earlier in the podcast too. Said if you leave, you're going to feel a lot better for about 2 weeks. Sometimes less than 2 weeks, but very rarely more than 2 weeks, unless things are really broken.
Right.
Right. And then at about 2 weeks in, you're going to feel awful. And you're going to realize how deeply lonely you really are. And you're going to want to go back. And there's a chance that this person will let you back. There's a chance they won't. But there's a decent chance that they will. But you will have created a rift in the relationship in terms of trust. And it will be, it is not a profitable move. It will be a long time before things go back. So you may want to save yourself the heartache of leaving and returning, unless you're really, truly, deeply ready to leave. And you're not. You're just mad. And you're mad because you're not telling the truth. You're not saying no when you need to say no. You're not saying yes when you need to say yes. So that's what was happening there.
So what is the grass is always greener, right? It's I could be over here, and even though this place over here looks exactly the same, we both make widgets. I make widgets for this company, and that company makes the same widgets, but man, it just looks so much better over there.
Well, we have the illusion that if we just put all the pieces in place, we can create an environment where there's no pain. And that's just not true. Being a human is extremely painful. And it has to be painful because we have to continue to try and to grow. Like, you cannot get away from pain. And the reason you can't get away from pain is because you can't get away from change. And we are in a situation where we always have to try to be better. And I don't know exactly why. You're getting into theology when you get into the question of why. And there are a lot of folks who are probably better suited to answer that question than I am. But it appears to be true. If you're not moving toward growth, you're moving away from it.
I remember,
that's the way it looks to me anyway.
I remember back in the day, we didn't have a lot of money. We were struggling. Marriage was a little rocky, and we moved a lot. And when you moved, it was exciting because you're going to start over, and you're going to we're getting a new house, and this rental is going to be better than the last rental, and all the things we used to fight about in that house are going to be better, and and you move, you get the same new house, but you're still struggling.
Every solution, every time I have a solution, it brings about unanticipated problems. Mm-hmm. And that's what I forget. Yeah. Because every solution brings about unanticipated new problems.
I was like, oh, we'll change the environment. It's going to be, this is going to be exciting. And
sometimes it is exciting, and sometimes it's better. Yeah. Sometimes it's a bigger house. But now with a bigger house comes a bigger heating bill. Oh, crap. Darn it. Now with a bigger house, I need more furniture. And what kind of furniture do I get? And, sometimes I can't hear my kids downstairs and they do dumb stuff. So how's that going to, right? Every new solution brings new problems. I'm tired of my partner. I'm going to get a new one. Okay. Well, that's fine. You see this in the culture now with all kinds of the changes the culture's making. I think we should all have sex with each other whenever we want to, wherever we want to, however we want to.
Yeah. Oh. What could possibly go wrong?
All right, give it a try. I guess we'll see how that goes. I'm curious in terms of what new problems that might bring with relationship to the attachment system and with relationship to social norms, particularly around parenting. I'm curious about, I think parenting with a child is being single and having a kid is a pretty lonely life. And I feel for people who get into that situation, and it's happening quite a bit more frequently. And okay, so I guess that's what we're going to try to do. Maybe those things are connected, maybe they're not. They might be.
Yeah.
But everybody's decided to go forward with that experiment, whether or not. And if I were 20, I would have, for sure.
Why not?
I mean, come on. Good
Anyone,
heavens.
anywhere?
Yeah, why not? If I were 20, the Tinder would have been amazing. And okay, we get to see what happens. Well, let's normalize pornography. All right, let's see how it goes. I mean, I don't want to have any more shame attached to any kind of sexual activity. Okay, everybody can feel good about whatever sex they're engaging in, but that's going to bring about a new set of problems that we don't anticipate yet, that we're just beginning to see.
Because if you're not going to draw the line here, how can you draw the line here? You got to.
There's going to be sooner or later, somebody has to say when. But guess what? There's no longer a reason. There's no longer a foundation. If all truth is relative, how far can we go? Well, we're about to find out. Okay, great. I guess we'll see. And, that is... that's the side note. Every new problem, or every solution, new problem brings about new problems. In the 80s and the 90s, we decided we didn't want to shame kids, and we gave everybody a participation trophy, for example. All right, let's find out what happens. But again, I'm sort of presenting one side of it. On the other hand, if you're one of the kids who got picked last, if you're a kid, I got bullied mercilessly in junior high school. And I don't necessarily think my life is better for it.
I can imagine.
But I wonder what happens if we eliminate all bullying and try to eliminate really any sense of hierarchy in school. Well, that's going to be interesting. So the intention is great. And the truth is, we don't know how it's going to go. We don't know if what we're going to get on the other side is better or not. I bring up this stuff with sex. My suspicion is it's not going to go well. However, I don't know. We'll find out, right? I think back frequently when I watch the world now, I think back to the 1960s, right? The sexual revolution in the 1960s, the hippies.
Free love and no war.
All that stuff. I grew up 20 years after that, 30 years after that, when it was just part of the social context. It wasn't really even a discussion anymore. It was over. Like the culture had shifted in terms of its sexual mores, shifted significantly. And what we're seeing now is that, again, in the 1960s was about 20 years after TV became mainstream. Okay, and 2020 is about 20 years after the internet became mainstream. So big seismic shifts in media consumption create big seismic shifts in media is the conclusion one might come to.
I read the other day that there's a baby shortage because people are, nobody wants to get married or
Sure, who wants to have a baby?
Kids, and
what's the point in
like
settling
a baby
down?
Shortage. Things are so different, and
China's having a hell of a baby shortage.
Really?
Oh yeah, the one baby policy was kind of a tough deal because they said, okay, everybody can only have one kid. Now, if everybody had just had one kid and it had been 50-50 boys and girls, it would have been fine.
But everybody wanted.
But the Chinese are pretty into boys and not so into girls. And so now you got 80-20. So there's 4 men to every eligible female, and the eligible females are saying, I'm good. I want to go have a career. Spitting out babies doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me. So the 1 in 4, really it's about 1 in 8, 1 in 9, 1 in 10. So the competition is extremely intense over there. It's really interesting to see what the social ramifications of that will be too. But it's a good example,
study,
right? So in China in the 90s, you have overpopulation. There's not enough food. What do? One-child policy. Let's fix the problem. Well, great. Good job. You fixed the problem. Overpopulation will not be a challenge in China anymore.
No.
But it's going to be really interesting to see what it looks like in China in 20 years.
Right.
When the demographics shift really, really heavily. Anyway, so we're a little off
but that's
the path here, but it all comes back to the same issue is I want to solve the problems in my life, but what I don't realize is every time I solve a problem, it's going to bring on new problems. And then we end up getting back to that question of meaning, because eventually I get to the point, midlife crisis is the net result of solving all the problems in your life. Man, if I can get this, now this is changing for the new generation, for the last several generations, it's been if I can get a good job, make a bunch of money, get a house, get a spouse, have a couple of kids, everything will be great.
It's gravy.
And then one day, you get all that stuff, you look around and you say, it's kind of the same. In some ways, it's worse. And now I'm kind of old and fat. That's weird.
Dang it.
Speaking for myself there, my hair's all gone. What am I going to do now?
Well, you made a mess of it, didn't you?
And that's the thing is on paper, it's not that messy, but in reality, it feels an awful lot like it always did. So what do I do now? What's the meaning? What's the purpose? What do I do for the next 40 or so years before my body finally pitters out and does what all bodies do? And what the hell happens then? Whew, we got some problems. We got some real questions to ask. And it gets back to meaning. So really, it's a bigger answer to the question than the question, but that's the real answer. Why do we always want more? Well, the answer to why we always want more, in part, is to distract us from the fact that there really isn't ever enough, and there really isn't a permanent solution to any of our problems.
Yeah. I always found the more money I made, the more things I bought, the more bills I had. And I was always back to square one. It's like, if I just made more money, I could do more of this. And then you get more money and you get a bigger house and more bills and a better car, so more bills and higher insurance. And it's like, man, I have less at the end of the day than I did living in our little 2-bedroom with our little Ford Taurus back.
I remember working at a nonprofit that marketed, among other things, clothing and attire to adolescents. And one of the things that was surprising to me is, this is in the early 2000s, they said demographically, adolescents have more discretionary spending than any other age group until retirement.
Wow.
Now, I don't know if it's true anymore, but there's no rent.
Well, yeah, because I look at, we have a 21-year-old who's living at home, and she's never there, but she has a place to sleep if she ever wants to come home. She's basically at her boyfriend's all the time. So she doesn't have rent, utilities, bills. Her car's on my insurance, which is crazy. So let's not even get back into my bad parenting
Sounds
style.
like that's another podcast.
That's a whole nother podcast. But her paychecks, and she's, working in a real estate office, doing really well. But she has no responsibilities, but she's a really good kid. So she really is a good kid. So it's easy to allow that lifestyle. But, and she's so good at, hey, oh, Mom, we're going out to lunch. Do you want to go out to lunch? And she never pulls out her debit card, but she has more money to play with at the end of the month than most people, I would think, because no responsibilities and a pretty darn good paycheck. So you said that, and I was like, no, yes.
Wait a minute.
She has zero obligation to her money. So car's paid off. I pay her insurance. So
yeah.
Just easier that way.
So again, it gets back to this question of meaning. What is there in life beyond simply solving and achieving?
Yeah. When are we finally done, right? When is it enough?
Yeah. What are we here for?
It's like I work here. Like I said, we do the widgets over here, but they do the widgets over there, but I'll be happier over there. I'm sure of it.
Yep.
Maybe work on yourself
Well, and it does get back to that question of, what wouldn't it be interesting? The other thing we do all that stuff because we want approval. And wouldn't it be interesting to just give ourselves some approval? We can just take a minute.
You're doing a good job.
You know what? Just even for nothing, even if you're not doing a good job, even if you're doing a mediocre job or a poor job, you can still take a second. You can still take a second and just give yourself some approval. You can still say, well, my body's doing a good job breathing for me.
You got up today.
Yeah.
You're on this side of the earth, so that's
I put
good.
one foot in front of the other. What the hell? There's something to be said for that.
My daughter has a new baby, so we have a new grandbaby. And, one day I just looked at her and said, you're a really good mom. You're doing really good. And she, she's hormonal, just had a baby, but she wants to cry. And she's like, thank you so much for saying that. Yeah. And I think we forget to tell people around us, you're doing a really good job. You're trying. You're trying. You're enough, right? So just love yourself, love everybody. Enough's enough. I always try to put a pretty little cap on it.
Wrap a bow on the end of that.
I do like to do that. So, well, I think it answers or asks more questions because I think we could go on forever about this. Why is the grass always greener? Why aren't we satisfied? Why? That's why it's power of the mind. We can go on.
We're trying to distract ourselves, from our pain, or because we don't realize that the solution will bring about new problems.
Yeah. Maybe I'm the problem. That company's not going to be any better for me. Maybe I work on myself and be a better employee or a better wife or a better whatever, rather than always trying to change and go after something else. So
makes sense. Maybe if I accept what is inside, if I stop and allow what's in there to come out, all that pain, shame, guilt, sadness. Some people say, what about the happiness? So, well, that's usually already out. Most people don't repress that. They let it come.
It's true.
But most of the time I'm running away from something. So what would it be like if I just allowed that to be there and gave myself some credit for doing the best I can today?
Yeah. I like it. Well, we good with this one?
Let's call it.
I feel it's good. I feel we can go down a bunch of other rabbit holes and we'll save that probably for another day. But I think this was a good insight, and thanks as always for my weekly therapy session. I appreciate it. And thank you guys for tuning into another awesome episode of Power of the Mind with my buddy Greg Struve with Granite Mountain Behavioral Healthcare.
Been real, been fun?
Been real, been fun.
Been real fun. For information about mental health and addiction treatment, you can reach out to Granite Mountain Behavioral Healthcare online at granitemountainbhc.com. That's Granite Mountain BHC.com. Or give us a call at 877-338-6287. That's 877-338-6287. If you have a comment about this podcast or a question you'd like us to address in the podcast, you can check out the Contact Us page at my website, gregstruve.com. That's GREGSTRUV as in Victor, E as in Edward.com. This has been a Cast 11 production brought to you by Granite Mountain Behavioral Healthcare. Follow Cast 11 on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest at Talking Glass Media.